NFL free agency officially began here at the top of this hour. So we are going to be keeping an eye throughout the course of the show today on all of the moves. We expect, as is the norm on this day, that it starts to come fast and furious, and we will keep an eye on all of the moves as they pertain certainly to the teams that we're interested in here, Saints, former LSU players, etc. The biggest news of the day for the Saints so far certainly involves Malcolm Jenkins. So the Saints have, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, come to terms with Malcolm Jenkins, their former first-round draft pick, who has been released by the Eagles. He was a first-round draft pick of the Saints in 2009. In 2014, the Saints let Malcolm Jenkins walk in free agency. And if you remember why they let Malcolm Jenkins walk in 2014, it was to sign Jarris Byrd. And Jarris Byrd is very likely the worst free agent signing in the history of the New Orleans Saints franchise. And I know we can talk about Jason David and some of the other awful ones, Kobe Fleener, but the Saints let Malcolm Jenkins walk when he was still in the prime of his career, and they signed Jarris Byrd, making him the richest safety in the history of the NFL at the time, a 6-year, $56 million contract for a guy that completely bombed. So Sean Payton, if you'll remember this, has said many times since moving on from Malcolm Jenkins that's one of the biggest mistakes of his career. He said this last year or 2 years ago when Philly played in New Orleans.
Malcolm, I think the world of him. He's a tremendous player. And, I hate that he got out of here. That was probably as big a mistake as we've made here in 13 years. And he's made up of all the right things. And he's a tremendous competitor.
When Sean Payton speaks that way about a player, you know how he feels. And if he has a chance to bring that guy back, he absolutely will. Bring that guy in, he absolutely will. So there you have it. Malcolm Jenkins is coming back now. What this likely means, and we're going to keep an eye on this throughout the course of the day. I'm gonna guess a little bit here. What this very likely means is that Vonn Bell's time with the Saints is probably over. And my guess is that we have a situation very similar to what happened with Mark Ingram a year ago. The Saints wanted to keep Mark Ingram. They had set their price, what they were willing to pay. Ingram thought he could get more on the open market, so the Saints let him walk. Ingram didn't command a much bigger price on the open market. It was negligible, really, what he got, the difference he got from Baltimore with what he was offered in New Orleans. And I think both sides regretted how it all played out with the benefit of hindsight. Vonn Bell likely will get more than what the Saints were willing to pay. So that's my guess, because you've still got Marcus Williams. You just drafted Chauncey Gardner-Johnson a year ago, and now you've added Malcolm Jenkins. It's unlikely they're going to pay what they would need to pay to keep Vonn Bell. So that's the two sides of this. One, Peyton always regretted letting Malcolm Jenkins walk in free agency, and this very likely means it's the end of the road for Vonn Bell in New Orleans. A lot of people have asked today about the two, about Jenkins and Vonn Bell. One resource that I like a lot, it's certainly not a be-all, end-all, but the Pro Football Focus New Orleans account on Twitter, if you want to go follow that. They've done a good job today. It's at PFF_Saints, at PFF_Saints. They've done a good job today of comparing side-by-side Jenkins and Vonn Bell from last year and really over the last 4 years at that position for New Orleans. So just in 2019 alone, snaps were similar. Malcolm Jenkins played 1,075 snaps, Vonn Bell 950 snaps. When you look at their overall rating, Jenkins 70.5, Bell 66.6. Jenkins rated better overall at that position last year than Vonn Bell did. Jenkins was much better in coverage, got a 70 as opposed to a 54.6 grade. Run defense, Vonn Bell was better. As a pass rusher, Vonn Bell was much better also. but Malcolm Jenkins wasn't being asked to rush the passer in Philadelphia. But nonetheless, when you look at a side-by-side comparison of the two, Jenkins better in coverage, better overall. Bell better against the run, better rushing the passer. But again, I don't think that the Saints are going to ask Malcolm Jenkins to do those things. It would make a lot more sense to have a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson doing that next year if it plays out that way. So anyway, I am very, very interested to see how this plays out with Malcolm Jenkins returning to New Orleans, mostly because Sean Payton, we've talked about this before, but Sean Payton, ever since those back-to-back-to-back 7-9 seasons, it's been abundantly clear what he has valued, and that is culture. That is locker room culture. And we've seen this time and again now with Sean Payton, where they have moved on from players. And by the way, I'm not saying Vonn Bell was a bad locker room culture guy. Don't misunderstand. I'll get to that in a second. But we've seen them move on from guys who might have been an internal problem. He did it initially when he came to New Orleans. He shipped out Dante Stallworth. They cut Wayne Gandy. I mean, guys who were not buying into the culture Sean Payton was bringing in 2006, he got rid of them. And then they went through a similar purge after that, the back-to-back-to-back 7-9 seasons. And you saw guys like Kenny Stills shipped out of here, Brandon Cooks, Jimmy Graham, who had the am I a wide receiver, am I a tight end argument, sort of feud, and they shipped him to Seattle to bring in Max Unger. We saw those types of moves with the Saints where they moved on from guys who were perceived locker room issues to bring in guys who bought into the culture. Well, you'll have full buy-in culturally, and you'll have a great locker room veteran presence with a guy like Malcolm Jenkins coming in. Can he still play at the level you need him to be determined, but I do like how many bodies you have in that safety room. And if you're really all in on this year, you bring in a good guy, a good locker room guy, a good veteran presence, a guy who's won a couple of championships, New Orleans and Philly. I like it. So it's not so much shipping out Vonn Bell as a bad locker room guy. It's more so bringing in a good locker room guy. I absolutely think the Saints would have loved to have had Vonn Bell back, but it just seems very clear that if Vonn Bell if you're re-signing Malcolm Jenkins, it's because you couldn't come to terms with Vonn Bell. He was just asking too much, so you're going to let him walk in free agency, go test the market. The other bit of news today, as it pertains to the Saints in that secondary, and this should not be a huge surprise, but Eli Apple is not going to be back in New Orleans. So Eli Apple is signing with the Las Vegas Raiders. So Janoris Jenkins most likely will be back in New Orleans. We'll see whatever price that may be, but Eli Apple is headed to Las Vegas. He will be a Raider.